The views and opinions of this program are those of the host, guests, and callers. There is substantial risk of loss in trading futures and options, which you should carefully consider prior to trading.
For over 95 years, we've set the bar. Power, we restored it. Protection, we reinvented it. Record yields, we redefined it. If there's one thing we know at FS, it's that just because something hasn't been done, doesn't mean it can't be done. We're never satisfied unless we take your farming operation to the next level. Run your equipment at peak efficiency and bust the bins this season. Visit fssystem.com.
And joining us now here on the program, pleased to have him back with us as we take a look at the global market picture, get an update on the impacts of the Russia-Ukraine conflict on the markets and more. Kyle Holland, Mintec Market Analyst based in the United Kingdom, is with us here today. And Kyle, it's great to have you back on the program. I hope you're doing well.
Yeah, thanks so much. It's been a little while. There's lots to talk about. I'm excited to discuss some of it today. Thanks so much for having me.
You bet. Let's dive in and talk a little bit. And I think just since we last talked, not a lot of change on the front when it comes to the Russia-Ukraine situation. I know Russia out of the grain deal, obviously. And so we've seen maybe a bit of a slowdown in some of the exports from Ukraine because of that. We've seen more port bombings on the Danube River, et cetera. I guess just to start, get us up to speed on the Russia-Ukraine situation and how it's impacting the global marketplace right now, Kyle.
So, yeah, I mean, you're quite right. Effectively, not a lot has really changed in the sense that the ports are still being bombed by drone attack, we hear. And I think added to that, not only have the Danube ports been attacked, which are the main export ports after the grain corridor closed, the grain corridor ports such as Mariupol, Berdansk, etc., continue to be attacked as well. And I think that's been a bit of a sea change in the way things have been going. When they were operating, I think they were an active target, as you may naturally imagine, but they were closed and they've still been attacked. And this has kind of increased the concerns overall about the grain corridor deal not going back online, not being a thing that's going to happen again this season, market players tell us. And I think more broadly, what has occurred is it's almost twofold, really. So the Ukrainian guys that we speak to, market players, are struggling to export a lot of their volumes. They're limited in where they can export to, naturally, because of the grain corridor deal closure. And you have the Danube ports, Izmail, Reni, and Kilia being attacked pretty much on a daily basis at this point. So it's very difficult for Ukrainian players to market their products. And actually, the reverse a little bit's happened than what you might expect. The price of some of the commodities have actually come down significantly because Ukraine are struggling to export. They're lacking buyers. So, for example, on sunflower oil, we've seen the prices cascade significantly lower, even lower than pre-war, which is something I don't think many people thought would happen.
Well, and I know as well with Ukraine trying to find other avenues to export, I believe here just in the last couple of days, we've seen more issues creep up with some of their neighboring countries to the west, haven't we, Kyle?
Yeah, absolutely correct. Yeah, you're spot on. So last time, I'm sure you remember, we discussed the export bans that are in place till the 15th of September. That, of course, has lapsed. Now, the EU kind of tried to buy a bit of time, maybe is the right word for this. They offered those nations, so Poland, Slovakia, Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria, a package to try and get them to accept Ukrainian grains and oilseeds, etc. after that date. Now, from what we've heard and what we understand from speaking to market players on the ground is that these countries have put the bans back in themselves. So they've said, we're not waiting for the EU to put these bans back in place or listen to our story. We're going to ban them anyway. And it's a very, very strange situation because EU nations on their own within the European Union can't decide trade policy. It's not something they can do. It's led by the bloc. Now, Bulgaria changed tactics a little bit and they said, okay, we'll allow agricultural imports from Ukraine into the nation. And pretty much immediately, from what we understand from market players in Bulgaria, there was blockades, there's protests by farmers that actually got quite heated. And from what we understand now, Bulgaria have joined the ban list again themselves. So again, as we circle back a little bit, Ukraine just struggling to find export avenues to get the grain to. You can still transship through, so you can still transship through Bulgaria, etc. You can go through the nation onto France or wherever that may be. But the export options are limited, farmers are struggling, and the prices for the Ukrainian farmers, I think, is a big worry. And I really want to highlight that, while we have a minute. and say that the prices they're getting for their goods right now are, in some cases, below margin. They're not making any money on these sales, but they're forced to continue to sell because they need the cash flow. They need money to keep rolling in. And it's a very difficult situation for everyone, I think.
It is a very difficult situation. It's just a very complicated situation. I feel like just when you look at the trade flows and all the issues, and obviously, with Russia standing there too. And I know as far as just the global wheat market picture, Russia's got such a huge crop right now at very, very cheap values that it is also kind of depressing prices in the wheat market a little bit, Kyle.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's probably true for most commodities, really. I mean, again, if we look at wheat as an example, the amount of wheat that Russia produces and has in store, because their export has been limited a little bit as well, of course, with the trade restrictions from the EU. So they have a lot of supply. They have a lot of oncoming supply. Same with sunflower seeds. They are, along with Ukraine, the two biggest producers of sunflower seeds and usually oil too. And they just have a lot of supply that they're looking to offload, and it's depressing the prices more generally. I mean, European wheat can't really compete with the Russian offers. There's not many wheat prices that actually can compete with the Russian prices right now, I don't think.
And it's something that we definitely want to keep our eyes on and watch this whole situation and some of those European prices. I watch, French wheat prices, Paris milling wheat futures pretty regularly as maybe an indicator of some of the trends we're seeing. And so I know that's something to keep our eyes on too. And one other note, I've seen a story from Reuters here about Romanian ports looking to kind of increase their capacity quickly as they remain one of the shipping lanes for some of this Ukrainian grain still here, despite some of the sanctions and more that we're talking about, Kyle.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So the big export port in terms of Romania for Ukrainian goods has been Constanța. Now, I think that, as I mentioned before, we're quite close to the situation of the players in the marketplace, and they're telling us that not everything's rosy in Constanța. They say the logistics are very, very, the cost are prohibitive. There's a huge queue. Not many ships are getting in and out on a daily basis. And the backlog is causing, again, another issue where Ukraine is struggling to export out theirs there as well. So I think, there's a lot of nations that have mentioned improving ports, offering their ports for Ukrainian use. But logistically, it's actually pretty difficult. It's not as easy as it sounds. On paper, it sounds great. But I can't count on one hand the amount of ideas I've heard from different nations saying, yeah, we'll help Ukraine export, and then it comes to nothing. Romania, I think, is probably the main one, really, where we've seen some actual action. And even that now seems to be a bit of a worry point with Constanța filling up and logistical issues happening there too.
So as we think about just the global market landscape and obviously the Russia-Ukraine situation having a big effect, we think about China and what they're doing as far as imports and bringing in a lot of South American grain. Also, obviously, their ties with Russia, or at least kind of standing behind Russia, so to speak, here as they work through their conflict and more. And just we think about the global trade flows overall. Big picture, anything really stand out to you here going into this fourth quarter of 2023 that we should be watching closely, Kyle?
I think you've highlighted one of the points I would certainly point out as well, if that's even a phrase. China is a massive one. What China do with their demand profile moving forward is going to be key. I'm sure, as many of the listeners and yourself know, Jesse, China is a difficult one to get clear information from. Let's be fair to them. You hear one thing, then you hear another, and then the government say another sometimes, particularly on ags. We heard from players in China that their wheat crop was badly damaged. They had quite an extreme amount of flooding, particularly in key areas where they grow most of their wheat. Now, if you look at some of the press releases, that hasn't really come through. But people are suspicious. They think there's probably a big hole for wheat there. And naturally, Russia have a rather large geographical advantage going into China rather than the other nations. So I think that's one big thing. It's also a big thing on beans as well, and meal more generally. So some of the oilseeds too. What did China look to buy? I mean, right now their pipelines are pretty full. They're coming up to Golden Week, which starts in the 1st of October, and lasts, I believe, till the following week, 8th-ish. So their buying has stepped down a little bit. And I think the big thing is, after this Golden Week, after the mini closure, what do they come back and buy? Are they buying wheat? Are they buying beans? And I think that could give us a real big clue of China's need and their actual amount that they have of these goods moving forward. I think the second biggest thing, I think, for me, and I think it's going to be an ongoing issue, is do we see a revival of the grain corridor deal? We keep hearing talk about it. We've heard that Putin's met with the UN and EU leaders, etc. From what we hear on the ground, and I'll try and lay it out as clean as I can, is that Russia want a bit too much. They want, a reconnection to the SWIFT banking system. They want a relaxation of export restrictions of some of their goods. And so far, the EU said, in press releases at least, that's not happening. Now, should there be a deal that happens, the trade flows again change. So I think, it's a bit cliche to say, but this is going to be one that we have to keep an eye on throughout the whole time until, the conflict resolves. Either way, it's going to be an issue moving forward, I think. And thirdly, I think, just to kind of round out, I think weather's a big thing as well. I know that's an easy thing to say, but yeah, I'll pinpoint it a bit more. Some of the crops that we're seeing come through, they're not looking that great. Some of the Canadian crops are not looking brilliant because of the very, very dry weather there in the key growing areas. A bit more rain's come through, but we see consistent downward revisions by Statistics Canada and the meteorological industries over there as well. So that for me is a big thing. How much does Canada actually produce when all is in the bin effectively?
I would also maybe throw in energy and crude oil with you there as well. I think that's another big issue we're going to have to watch here through this fourth quarter, Kyle.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, I mean, crude oil prices have been accelerating. There are some concerns, of course. How much further upside can there be? But then you have some of the OPEC nations, OPEC Plus, saying that they don't want to export as many barrels, and there's always this float in the background. And I think you're right. I think some of the macro issues as well in the US and China more broadly could come into play as well. So many issues. I think I don't envy anyone. It's so difficult right now to pin down the exact scenario you think is going to happen. So many things are changing. So many things are in flux. It's very, very difficult.
Well, we do appreciate the global perspective on the markets, and we'll look forward to getting you back on the show again soon. Kyle Holland, market analyst with Mintec. Thanks so much for the time, and we will talk to you again soon.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me. Take care.